Greetings everybody, welcome back to Psychedelics today. It's David here having a conversation with Fred Barrett, and today is Tuesday, June the 20th, and we have some really good news that we're celebrating together here, Fred, so congratulations and thanks a lot for joining us. How's life today?
Thank you so much, David. It's really wonderful. I'm now in Denver, getting ready to start the full psychedelic science convention with lots of colleagues and friends. But I am just really excited for the future, my own future, and the future of the Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research.
Yeah, and we're going to talk all about the center, your role there. You've been there a while, and then your new role today, stepping into being the director of that Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research. So congrats, Mazal Tov, and it's a beautiful thing. So I want to get to know you personally first before we jump into that.
Okay.
So you're a Philly man.
Yes.
That's all I know. So paint a picture for us. Who are you in this world? And how on earth did you find your way to be in this amazing role and working in psychedelic research?
Yeah, it's really an honor and a privilege to be involved in this work. I grew up in South Philly, and I began playing music at an early age, and for quite some time was a professional musician. Not that long, but I entered my undergrad degree program for music education at Temple University in Philadelphia, thinking that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I liked helping people and I loved playing music. And I naively thought that there would always be good paying jobs for music teachers. But I got involved in all sorts of things. I played the trumpet, the violin, the drums, and the guitar. I played in a punk rock band, as well as community orchestras and musical theater. I arranged music for a salsa merengue band, and was in a bunch of wedding bands. And I was really loving it, but also it really began to wear on me. Doing something you love and having to do it, night in, day out for money, can sometimes sour you towards it. And I was feeling that towards the end of my undergrad career, and was also beginning psychology core courses and learning that I really enjoyed psychology. And I ended up taking an extra year or two, got a double major in psychology, realized I was really enamored by research, and decided to, kind of strike off in the direction of research. I worked for a couple of years in the schizophrenia research lab at the University of Pennsylvania, learned all about brain imaging and neurocognition and neuropsychology, and at once really kind of confirmed for me how much I really enjoyed research, but also, what really motivated my love of music. And that was a kind of love of exploring myself, understanding my emotions, being able to communicate emotions, being able to help others to communicate their emotions. I mean, I think music is an incredibly powerful channel for that type of information. But in the meantime, I also kind of was struck by how much we all do that. How much people in real life all around the world use music every day to kind of regulate their emotions, and everybody has this. If you ask them, they'll say, I have, what song do you listen to when you're happy? What do you listen to when you're sad? What do you listen to when you want to be happy or when you want to be sad? And everybody has an answer, but your answer is not likely to be my answer, right? And it's a really peculiar thing. But it struck me that there are a lot of mysteries of the mind and the brain, and we should be using music as a tool to study those. We should be harnessing music for the power of science. And I convinced myself that's what I wanted to do. And I found a graduate research program at UC Davis that allowed me to do that. It allowed me to use music as a tool to study the brain and the mind. And so I went off and did that for 6 years. And along the way also, just came to appreciate how much I was driven by and wanted to further understand altered states of consciousness. I can't tell you, we'll come back to this in a minute, but there's something ineffable, if you will, about being on stage and being in the groove and playing with a really kind of tight ensemble, and you lose yourself. You completely lose yourself to the music, and it's one of the most profound experiences. And I wanted to understand that too. But also deep listening with music. I don't know when the last time is that you've done this, but you should do it. Everybody should do it tonight. Go into your bedroom, close the door, shut the lights off, drop the shades, and turn on an album and just listen. Just close your eyes and just make nothing else exist but the music. Oh, yeah, what's going on there, and how can we utilize it? So I went through grad school trying to answer all sorts of questions in the form of, well, how does this experience with music reflect itself in the brain, and what brain mechanisms are underlying this other thing that happens with music? And it got really complicated for the reason that I referred to a minute ago. We have these tricky things called preferences and idiosyncratic relationships with music. Like, I may say, I don't know, I love hip hop, and you may say, well, I hate hip hop, but I love country. And frankly, the kind of basic rules of composing both of those things are pretty much the same. It's just there are a lot of other kind of sociocultural associations and things we pile on top of these things that get in the way of us just experiencing the music. And but that's an important part of our musical lives. But then we also have these relationships with pieces of music that draw us into memories that I don't otherwise like this band, but that one Johnny Cash song reminds me of my old girlfriend, right? I was getting kind of all wrapped up in this, and at the same time, there was another grad student a couple years ahead of me, Catherine McLean, who was studying the effects of meditation on attention. She graduated. She came here to Hopkins to work with Roland Griffiths, and they got some money to do a study in people with a long-term meditation practice, and they got some money to do brain imaging, and they were going to image the afterglow and try to learn something about that. And Catherine said, well, we should use music to do that. I know a guy. And so she sent me the string of emails, how did you select your music? How did you design your study? How did you analyze your data? How did you interpret your findings? And I sent her a tongue-in-cheek reply, like, hire me and I'll do it for you. And she said, okay.
What year was this, Fred?
This was 2012 to 2013. This is 2013. And so I came here in 2013, kind of starry-eyed and kind of still a little green behind the ears. And I thought, music is a great tool to study the mind, but psychedelic drugs must be such a more powerful tool to study the mind and the brain. And essentially that's what's driven me since. I see psychedelics, music, brain imaging, cognitive testing, qualitative interviews, questionnaires, all of these things are all different types of tools in the kitchen of trying to study the mind. And that's what motivates me, is really just trying to use whatever tools we have access to understand this complex experience that we have as humans.
I am really happy that you are alive, Fred, and that you are taking your lifetime's work to this new level. And it's beautiful that you're talking about somehow you've managed to integrate music into your kind of professional practice. And that's actually the thing that brought you to Johns Hopkins 10 years ago, like the music. Not because a lot of people drop that, like they put the guitar away or they just get too involved in work. And just as a quick aside, do you play music anymore, or are you kind of part of any kind of musical ensembles?
I'm really, really, unfortunately, no, and I'm trying to find ways to get back into that. It's just that I've been completely overtaken by the kind of immediacy and the I don't want to say pressure, but the urgency of the science that we're conducting here, and also just trying to manage a good work-life balance. I have a couple of young children and an amazing partner who's very supportive, and
yeah.
I think if I had another third of my time available, that would be filled with music, still playing and performing. But I can say that I do have a guitar sitting in my office. It's at this point it's really just an aggrandized fidget tool, but I can pull away and pluck a bit at the guitar to clear my mind or to kind of focus my thoughts, but nothing professional, nothing outward facing. Yeah.
Was that a didgeridoo I saw as well?
Oh, no, that's okay. A poster tube.
Oh.
but the good eye and good try. I have a couple of hand drums of various types. I have a drum set at home, trap set, and still have my violin.
Amazing. Yeah, just talking about music itself, that there's a vibration there, there's a sacredness, and you were talking about the power of being on stage and, in a sense, ego dissolution, merging with the music, merging with the crowd, merging with the moment. Something that is very, I think, different about Johns Hopkins and the center that you're now the director of is the emphasis on the more spiritual, mystical aspects of psychedelic experiences. And, I'm fascinated by the actual name of the center. It contains the word consciousness there. And I did a bit of research. I looked at all the other psychedelic research centers around the world, Mount Sinai and UC Davis and all the other folks, NYU. None of them used the word consciousness. They had neurotherapeutics, therapy, psychotherapy, neuroscience, medicine, but none had consciousness. So what is it for you that fascinates you around this question of consciousness and its role in psychedelic healing? And I think especially for you as a cognitive neuroscientist, how do you approach the experience of consciousness? And as an area of research as well.
Excellent question. I'm inspired by the trust and assumption that we all experience consciousness, that consciousness is this kind of ineffable and almost intractable state that yet we still have yet to pierce with science in a really fundamental way. In one sense, every neuroscientist, every psychologist, for sure, and many other academics, we're all students of consciousness to the degree that we study the contents of consciousness or kind of processes or dynamics of consciousness. I think that the word consciousness itself in the name of our center is aspirational in a sense, because at the end of the day, and we've written about this, it's not clear to me that we will really truly pierce the veil of consciousness with the tools that we have to bring to bear for empirical science. But I think that people often talk about psychedelics as consciousness altering devices for a reason, and I think at the very least, psychedelics have the potential of revealing the nature of one's own mind to the self. So I think it's likely that the real power of psychedelics is just that. I mean, that goes to the fundamental basis of the word psychedelic to begin with, that Humphrey Osmond coined, decades ago, that mind revealing. But I think where the limits are really the limits of our tools of science at this moment. Psychedelics may reveal aspects of consciousness to the individual who's having a psychedelic experience, but yet how do we still characterize that? That's the challenge. I think that's the challenge of the day. I think that's something that we all at the center are deeply motivated by and deeply interested in. And if we don't get there, then we'll get as close as we can, right? But I think it's reflective. The C word, the second C word in our name, is really reflective of an orientation that goes beyond a medical indication, or goes beyond a commercialization, or goes beyond some of the more kind of if you will pedestrian applications of psychedelics, and acknowledges this thing. And I think it reflects back on something that our center has really focused on, that others have to an extent, but I think is a hallmark of our research program, is really kind of starting with and continually returning back to studies with healthy individuals and trying to understand the basic mechanisms of psychedelic drug action, not just brain mechanisms, not just blood biomarkers, but also psychological constructs, and through qualitative interviews and surveys, we've done an awful lot to try to begin to map that space out. And we're not alone. Other people are doing this too. It's very important to do this. It's very important that many, many different centers are doing this work. But I think that remains at the core of our true interest in this field.
And just as a bit of a retrospective for folks listening, Johns Hopkins was the first institute to start doing psychedelic research after Prohibition, other than, I think Rick Strassman did it individually. So the team there, the research group in, I think, the year 2000, early 2000s, came out and started doing this work. And it was very brave. And I'm sure there was a lot of red tape and departmental meetings to get that approval. But can you walk people through retrospectively the last couple of decades of what's been happening at Johns Hopkins, and then what happened when Professor Roland Griffiths became director, and a lot of that money came in to really amplify the research you were doing a couple of years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So it may or may not be well known that Maryland and Baltimore in particular is really at the center of psychedelic science from the beginning. There were studies ongoing at Maryland Psychiatric Institute and Spring Grove, as well as studies that almost got started in human beings at Johns Hopkins back in the late '60s and early '70s. There were folks, including colleagues of ours, Bill Richards is one, and Lee McCabe is another. Folks who were in Baltimore doing this important research before the Controlled Substances Act was passed. It was really, Roland and Bill that got it started again. They got the first approval for a study at Hopkins in 1999, and prior to that, Rick Strassman had done a study in very hallucinogen experienced individuals with dimethyltryptamine at the University of New Mexico, and also a couple folks, Franz Mullenweider, Euphrazine Gazoulis Mayfrank, and a couple of other folks in Europe were conducting a couple of small, molecular imaging studies. But it was really Roland's study that kicked off in 1999. It was published in 2006. That was the first to study this in healthy, otherwise hallucinogen naive individuals. And I think that's widely seen as the spark that really renewed interest in this field. It's remarkable for at least a few reasons, but one is that it demonstrated that psychedelics could be safely administered to people in a controlled fashion, and not only that, but lead to such profound experiences as those that would allow people to endorse having had one of the top five or single most personally meaningful and spiritually significant experiences of their lives. So frankly, the work here has been going on for a quarter century. The first study was just a one-off within subject comparison between psilocybin and a very high dose of methylphenidate. And the next study was a dose effects study. Okay, well, we know we can do this with a very high dose, but what dose gives us enough of an effect to break through in a mystical experience while not having a high likelihood of a challenging experience? And then what are the different dose ranges look like? And from there, getting into clinical studies with cancer patients. That was the first study. Then we published the first randomized controlled trial in patients suffering from depression. Matt Johnson published a study in smokers. And we've been following up since. But I've had the benefit and privilege of being able to run a study in long-term meditators that hasn't yet been published, but conducting additional research. I had one of the first modern grants from the NIH to study psilocybin in healthy individuals, and that was funded in 2016. Again, back to studying healthy individuals to understand that not only the basic mechanisms of these experiences, but also to really investigate what the potential benefits for well people can be.
And I think it's really important when we're talking about the last couple of decades, Johns Hopkins, the role of Professor Griffiths, and the impact he's had, the legacy that he's leaving as he moves out of the director role. So I'd love to hear some of your experiences of working with Roland and how the experience has been since he has started talking about his terminal diagnosis, and how that has been for the team.
Yeah, I can say that Roland has been one of the most influential and important mentors of my life, and he has mentored each of the faculty within the Psychedelic Research Center. So we've all been trained by Roland. We've all benefited from Roland's mentorship. He's mentored over 60 postdoctoral fellows who went on to be scientists or policymakers or things, and he's truly an international expert in the field of behavioral pharmacology writ large. But his impact on the psychedelic world, I think, can't be understated. He's just a remarkable man. He is so precise and careful and and piercing with his thinking, but yet so clear in being able to articulate complex ideas and really the most interesting and important nuggets of a finding. Having benefited from that mentorship, it's had an incredible positive impact on my science and my scientific career. Um, but and I think that's one of the reasons that he's been a leading figure in psychedelic research. And I think those are some of the reasons that he was able to pull this off to begin with. Is given his kind of long and prodigious career, um, if someone's going to do this objectively and carefully, it's Roland, and I think that's what he's brought to the table. And I think that's something, we all of us, we all come to the table with our own biases and expectations, but I think that setting the example of rigor and care in conducting this research, I think we've all caught that bug, and I think it's important. Not only he's set a good example to not only have a measured and responsible approach to how we advance this research, but also a critical voice and being clear and understanding what the benefits, but also the risks are of these compounds. I don't think anybody argues that these are not powerful compounds. I don't think anybody argues that these are not potentially life-changing experiences. And for such a powerful space, you need to take care and you need to be careful, not only to protect the rights and the welfare of your participants, but also to communicate science objectively, with as little hype as possible and on its merits, rather than completely saturating yourself in the hope. There is hope. There's a lot to be hopeful for, but we have to be careful with this too.
Yeah, I'm really hearing loud and clear that Professor Griffiths was able, with his credentials and respect, to get approval, to be believed, primarily because he was letting the science speak. And unfortunately, for 50 years, the science was unable to speak. It was unable to search and explore and ask questions. So now we're asking these questions and getting data and answers. And where would you say over those decades the center and Johns Hopkins has evolved? So particularly I'm thinking over that time, other institutes have sprung up, other kind of research groups have sprung up over the last 20 years or so. So what really makes Johns Hopkins stand out? What's its little niche, or what does it do a bit differently, and how it kind of sets its intentions and impacts?
Yeah, I think we are distinguished and we lead in a few particular ways. One of those is really in track record of careful research that we've been able to build over the past quarter century, as a group, but also the willingness and the capacity to push the envelope, to really begin to get to the edge of our understanding of these compounds and then map it carefully. As time has passed, we have grown as a group to be more and more kind of eclectic and varied in our interests. We now have a growing faculty, including Albert Garcia Ramu, who was originally trained as a transpersonal psychologist and then came on before I did, to become a postdoctoral fellow and then a faculty member here at Hopkins doing psychedelic research. And he has just an incredibly careful approach, but a deep interest in really mapping and charting the use of psychedelics for the treatment of various substance use disorders, as well as other psychiatric and non-psychiatric disorders such as Alzheimer's, dementia, and post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. He's really been remarkable in seeing some opportunities for expanding our understanding of the places in which psychedelics may be effective in treatment. We also have Sandeep Nayak, who's a psychiatrist and an expert in substance use disorders. He's tackling opioid use disorder, but also planning, studies in PTSD and in the microdosing space. We still have a dearth of really well-controlled longitudinal studies of microdosing, and we have my program of research that is really focused currently on brain mechanisms of psychedelic experience in both acute experiences, but also the long-term changes in the brain that seem to accompany these remarkable changes in behavior and clinical status. Right? someone goes from being, tragically depressed for decades to finding healing. Something must change in the brain, and if we understand what changes in the brain, we may be able to optimize these things and also develop new therapies. And then we also have Dr. David Yaden, who was just installed as the inaugural Roland Griffiths Chair for the study of psychedelics and secular spirituality. David comes with just an incredible track record of his own studying spirituality, being a critical voice who's sophisticated in terms of methods and psychometrics to understand better, not only these potential understanding of the spiritual experience, but also in general, the risks and benefits of psychedelic drugs. I think the way that we've grown as a group, including, many of us are interested in really charting all of the different variables involved in understanding the impact of set and setting. I have a study that's funded now by the Cohen Foundation to really dig into particular types of music listening and how they may, acutely affect the psychedelic experience. That's one big. I think, if you think of all of the variables that you can try to push around to manipulate set and setting, it's not just a couple dials. It's like a church organ. It's like a concert organ. And I think that music is one of the biggest keys that we can press on. So I'm going to start pressing on it. And I think just to answer your question, where the center has grown in the past 20 years has really been to cover what I think are some of the most important corners of this space. The use of psychedelics for a variety of psychiatric and medical indications, understanding the effects of psychedelics in healthy people, and using psychedelics as a tool to understand wellness and spiritual experience, yet also diving deep and probing circuits and mechanisms in the brain that may accompany these things. And from perspective of a positive psychologist or a cognitive neuroscientist or a psychiatrist or a transpersonal psychologist, having this kind of almost plural, set of viewpoints, I think, is one of the strengths that's going to bring us into, the next decade of this space.
I love, both the specific research you're going to be working on, the people that you've got in the team, but also the overarching assumptions that you have around this work itself. The emphasis on consciousness. You're also talking about more kind of tracking long-term data, kind of longitudinal, just seeing, what kind of wellness outcomes could we be tracking over a year or 5 years, not just alleviation of symptoms, but more kind of, thriving and wellness. And what would you say are some of the interesting models of doing research that you're interested in, or that the center is going to be doing more of potentially around, what kinds of humans, what kinds of kind of trial designs, data collection methods, and also, just being honest, we're going through what people are calling the psychedelic renaissance, resurgence. There's still money around, not quite like the boom days of a few years back, but there's philanthropic money. There's a lot of research trials looking for trial sites. So how does the way that you're approaching just the big picture of psychedelic research interact with money, with philanthropy, with government regulation, with partnerships with kind of hospitals and healthcare, particularly, in the Pennsylvania area and that part of the world? So just paint a picture. I know these are quite complicated and sometimes tentative areas to talk about, but to what extent you feel comfortable. I'd love to hear your thoughts, just visioning it out, because we are on the precipice here.
Yeah, excellent space to explore here. There are a lot of different models of how to contribute to this space, and one of the models that I think you alluded to is becoming a clinical trial site for a large multi-site or multinational clinical trial, and that's an excellent way for people to get into this research. It's an excellent way to get your feet wet and your hands dirty, and insert whatever metaphor or malaphor you want here. It's a good way to get involved, but that's but it's never been one of our strongest suits. Conducting multi-site clinical trials can be incredibly arduous, and participating in multi-site clinical trials can be incredibly arduous and resource heavy. They're important things that need to be done, to move the field forward and answer some of the most forefronted questions in the medical space. But I think that our forte really has been in, proof of or early stage proof of concept trials. Sticking our foot a little further into the deep end to see if we can float there, or if water's warm or cold. And I think that's a model that we're going to continue with. But also, extended clinical trials in healthy individuals. Those are studies that we're incredibly interested in. Um, as the field really matures, we're going to have to be a lot more rigorous than we were in the past in terms of addressing challenges such as, well, what is an adequate control condition for. I was in a meeting with a reviewer from the FDA, and he said, "Listen, I just got to be honest with you. I don't know how you blind a mystical experience or an ego dissolution experience. Like, you can't blind that. And if that experience is the medicine, then what do you? How can you construct a reasonable trial around that? Some really good suggestions have been made by folks, and some interesting things we want to pursue, such as dose finding studies, or other active control conditions. But I think the future is bright. We're going to be announcing within the next month or two, actually a pretty radical expansion of our footprint within the psychedelic space. And I can't give away too many details, except we are thinking broadly, and we're thinking in a much larger framework than we've operated before. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah, I'd love to hear more. Yeah, and it's in a sense makes sense. The expertise that you've got there in your culture, there's all about, I believe, spreading the knowledge out and being a little bit more open-minded about what goes on with consciousness and healing. So it makes sense to spread that, especially because you're, to some extent, a bit of an outlier in just how open you are to really exploring these big questions. And I wanted to ask, when it comes to skills, competence, training and education in working with psychedelics, more from a professional perspective. We have a lot of folks that are working with psychedelics, with others. How do you see the role of research itself and the development of clinical protocols being delivered to tens of thousands of people, millions of people that are going to be holding space, that are going to be doing the assessment and harm reduction, the preparation and the integration work? So what's the role of a research institute like Johns Hopkins? And with all the knowledge and data that you've gathered, how can that be kind of extrapolated to the many that really need this to be provided at their local doctor's office or by their psychotherapist?
Yeah, yeah. It's. I find myself in a really. I find that we all are in a very interesting place here. Um, a lot of what is currently done in the session room, at least with psilocybin, if not with other psychedelic like compounds, is some strange mixture of received knowledge and clinical opinion and tradition almost, and I think that we're still in a bit of a stage of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? I mean, we have this model with preparation and then monitoring and support and then integration, and people have a general sense of what they think should be in a playlist for people when they're going through these experiences. I'll very ungenerously refer to that as the mixtapeology. We have our own mixtape. Everybody has their mixtape. It's great, but no one's turned the dials on these things, and that's the problem. Is that to come through with a really evidence-based training program, you have to build a base of evidence, and that's it's one of the things that the field is lacking. And I think one of the most important pieces moving forward in ensuring that this can be scaled, that when we at the point in time when we have strip mall psychedelic clinics, that the person sitting and holding space for a patient there has enough of what they need to do that safely and carefully and in a helpful fashion, and without the ultimate pressure that's going to come from if a corporation is supporting this to cut costs and increase profits. I I I I believe the role of our center will be to help establish those norms to help establish that evidence base that will help us to understand, well, what really is necessary, and what are the, the I don't want to even say the minimum criteria. I want to say the appropriate criteria
Yeah.
for training and expertise, right? To make sure that this is done well and done safely.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we're at that stage now. We've got the minimum, we've got the kind of floor set. Now we're going to really build on top of that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, so one final question I've got, and that's a bit lighter, Fred, about music. So everyone listening, have a think about Fred's question. If you're going to close the room tonight or wherever you are, what music are you going to listen to? So I want to ask us that question, Fred. So for me, I just want to share. The last 4 days, I've started listening to a genre of music I forgot about from when I was a young teenager. It's called acid house trance music. It was big in England in the early 90s. And I moved on from that into like drum and bass music and jungle and other stuff. But the last 4 days I've been listening more to that music, acid house and acid trance, and I felt the vibrations in my body change. Like my body
Yeah.
and soul have really started to vibrate in a different way, and it's like quite challenging in a sense, but it's also invigorating. So I'm really just soaking up that kind of music this week basically. So for you, where are you holding in the music that kind of invigorates you, or that kind of helps you feel connected or grounded, or whatever ways it is that you're exploring at the moment internally?
Yeah, I wish I could share my Spotify playlist right now. It's an eclectic mix of all sorts of things, and frankly, my needs change from day to day. But I'd say over the past month, it has gone from um, this kind of ambient group called the Slow Dancing Society. And if you've never listened to them, listen to them quietly in a space that you want to be calm. And then jumping a little bit to dubstep, very briefly. But a little, the two more prominent genres or spaces that I've been the past couple weeks are essentially hardcore music. So there's a band called Hatebreed, that sounds really rough, but that has really affirming lyrics. And listening to that music is almost cathartic. At least that's how I experience it. But I think actually the most is kind of bluegrassy reflective. So I don't know if you can call Old Crow Medicine Show bluegrass. I want to briefly call them bluegrass, but also Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. Bella
Yeah.
Fleck's done a lot of kind of bluegrass adjacent, and then there's one song I'm actually looking for right now by Nickel Creek. Yeah, so this has been my playlist. More recently has included Wagon Wheel from Old Crow Medicine Show, and a song called Rest of My Life by Nickel Creek. It's just really kind of it doesn't put me into quite a depth of an altered states of consciousness as it does really just connect me back with kind of almost like a roots type of feeling and comfort. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Beautifully eclectic. Thanks for sharing that, Fred.
sure.
Yeah, I
Thanks for
love that.
asking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and each music is an archetypal energy called upon at different times, perhaps.
exactly. Different needs call for different methods.
So, before we wrap, anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to briefly tell folks about, or where they can kind of find out more information about you and about the center?
Yeah, thanks. So I just want to acknowledge the incredible legacy that Roland is leaving for the center as he steps down as the founding director of the center, and the tremendous honor that it is for me to be kind of taking the reins. Hopkins has been at the forefront of psychedelic research for over 20 years. I've been on the team for 10 years, and I've had the most amazing opportunity to be a part of this amazing group of researchers. I end talks with a big layup of all the folks in the center, and I introduce them as the people with whom I have the privilege of working every day, and without which none of the stuff at the center would happen. And each and every one of them is a valuable and wonderful contributor to this work. Having the chance to lead such a talented team is clearly the opportunity of a lifetime. Um, and I feel even that much more responsibility to ensure that we are all good stewards of this research, because it's remarkable to think that if we really do our job right, at the end of the day, we may be able to have impact as a field to help countless people. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that with gratitude and looking really forward to the future.
Beautiful. Yeah, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, and definitely you are. Yeah, there's many giants you are with, and yeah, thank you for carrying that torch.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for listening, folks. And Fred Barrett, the new director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research. Congratulations, and yeah, blessings for the journey ahead from myself and the Psychedelics Today team. Really exciting news. Congrats.
Thank you.
All right, God bless everyone. Thanks so much for listening.